with more fires breaking out across the west coast of California and Oregon, basically the western half of the United States, I had to ask myself, is this really climate change? When we're looking at a map, we can see these fires are happening in the U.S. They're not appearing to be spreading to Canada or Mexico, but that's because the map is showing United States data. Okay, so there are fires happening in random places of Canada and Mexico, but that's not what this video is about. How come Democrats like Joe Biden and AOC and Gavin Newsom, they just say simply, this is as a result of global warming, and that's the science, and that's the end of their argument. They go no further, and all of their Democrat followers eat that shit up like they are part of the human centipede. And you really have to be that way if you are a Democrat, because science, as I said in an earlier video, science has discovered that people will believe anything if you just tell them that science has discovered it. Okay, so let me ask a few scientific questions here to basically disprove their whole claim that global warming or climate change is causing these wildfires. Number one, we are catching arsonists who are setting fire to the trees in the forest. This is in the news. Actual people, their faces are being shown as the arsons who set fire to the trees. Okay, so that isn't enough, because that's what you would call anthropogenic. Anthropogenic means caused by humans, and the Democrat liberals, they want to, and the eco-nuts, just call them eco-nuts from now on, they want to say that these fires are anthropogenic. In other words, the human industry is putting out too much CO2, and the CO2 is causing the fires. Okay, wait a minute. Trees take in CO2 and put out oxygen. That is part of nature's cycle. So how could too much CO2 be a problem? I understand if there's way, way, way too much CO2, okay, maybe we have a problem on our hands. We're all going to have a hard time breathing. But look at it this way. If we add up all the CO2 that's being output by industries, and you have to measure that in gigatons. So you look at how much CO2 is in gigatons. Now, just to be very thorough, I went to a website called the Worldwide Resources Institute, and I was not just looking at industrial process and their output of CO2, but I also wanted to look at energy, agriculture, and waste in general. But if you add all of those up, our most recent estimates, which is actually from 2016, is about 46.1 gigatons in total. Now, if we convert 46.1 gigatons into pounds, we get a number that's really quite high. It's 101 trillion, 101.6 trillion actually. We have about 1.2 billion vehicles on planet Earth, and each vehicle puts out an estimated 4.6 metric tons of CO2 per year. If we convert this number into pounds times all the vehicles, we are getting a number around 12.169 trillion. So let's add that into our equation. It gives us a number about 122.8 trillion pounds of CO2 exported every year. Now let's go back to our tree equation. Okay, now how many trees are on planet Earth? Okay, Google estimates about 3 trillion trees are on planet Earth. And then how much CO2 can one tree process per year? About 42 pounds. Okay, so 3 trillion times 42 is 126 trillion. If the trees are eating up 126 trillion pounds of CO2, and remember the bad guys, the industry and the automobiles putting out 122.8 trillion pounds of CO2 per year, well, it looks like the trees are winning the battle by about 3 or 4 trillion pounds. Now you say, wait a minute, what about humans and animals exhaling CO2 every day? That is such a small and insignificant number worldwide. That's estimated to be 3 billion pounds. So it's barely a drop in the bucket when you're looking at trillions. So the trees are winning the battle. We don't have an abundance of CO2, and CO2 makes up 90%. That's 90% of the greenhouse gases that they blame global warming on, or climate change. Global warming is really a better term if that's what you want to call it. The idea that the earth is going to get hotter and hotter slowly to the point where it's unbearable, because climate change is always happening. For example, I live out in the desert. It's hot and dry in the summer. It's cold and snowy in the winter. We have changing seasons. The climate changes. So it's hot and dry, then it's cold and snowy. Climate change is, in that sense, is very normal. but they don't expect you to even think of it that way. They want to make it into a problem. So they lump climate change in with the term global warming. They say we have too much CO2. They send out Al Gore to give you a timeline. But if you watch a documentary on YouTube, I actually paid $10 for this documentary because I care to support independent creators. A wonderful documentary called Climate Hustle basically debunks Al Gore's entire Inconvenient Truth movie. And it shows you that all these politicians that want to raise your taxes to help fight global warming, they're really scamming you. It was really fascinating. So I recommend checking out Climate Hustle for further research. But I just had to ask my own questions here because I'm like, wait a minute. Aren't trees the number one helper when it comes to battling CO2? And I thought, wait a minute, how many trees do we have on planet Earth? And I'm like, am I the only person that's ever done this Google search and then did some simple math? Like, really? Like, of all of our Congress people, do they really think climate change is that big of a problem? And they say Donald Trump denies the science regarding global warming. Well, hell yes, I would deny it too. If you just do my simple equation, you can see that the trees are winning the battle, then yes, I'm going to deny your stupid claim that climate change is causing the fires or global warming is causing the fires. And furthermore, how could CO2 or excess CO2 or greenhouse gases possibly be causing the wildfires? The only way that could be is if it was so incredibly hot that trees would spontaneously combust. Now, how hot does wood have to be to spontaneously combust with global warming? Let's Google that one. Wood has to be over 600 degrees Celsius, which is over 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, when was the last time you were walking through the forest and it was over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit? Never? Like maybe on a really hot day, it's 100 or 110 Fahrenheit, but it wouldn't be over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit unless the forest was already on fire. So global warming is not causing trees to spontaneously combust. And if that was the case, it would be happening all over the world. So this is such a freaking hoax. I just had to make this video to share my truth because it seems really simple. Like, am I missing something here? Like, you factor in all the CO2 from industry. You factor in the CO2 from people and animals exhaling. It's still not significant. You might factor in automobiles, but if an automobile actually has a properly burning engine, it doesn't put out any pollutants if it's burning perfectly clean. I learned this in auto mechanics class, which is why we have to have smog checks. But then I would think, probably automobiles don't have that much of an impact either because we're not really seeing drastic temperature fluctuations. But if we did have an abundance of CO2, according to the Climate Hustle movie that I purchased on YouTube, believe it or not, the climate actually gets cooler, not warmer, when there is an abundance of CO2. And I'm not going to get into all that explanation here. You can rent the Climate Hustle movie for yourself or just watch the preview if you want. I wanted to excerpt some of the Climate Hustle movie to show you here in this YouTube video, but they actually blocked me from doing that. I can't even take out a short excerpt with a QuickTime screen capture. Not able to do it. So you'll have to take my word for it. Let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and a share. Check out some of the other videos on my channel. I really appreciate you being here. And don't forget to go outside, socialize, work, play, and disobey. Be sure to check out my planned pandemic series as we are exposing the lies regarding COVID-19. It's getting worse and worse, unfortunately, as we get into a technocrat medical tyranny state all across the country, and other countries are experiencing the same. So we have to keep sharing this and exposing the lies. By the way, part 5 of my video series called Who is Lying to You actually got banned from YouTube. So I had to move that to BitChute. I'm also now on Vimeo. I appreciate your viewership so much. Thank you for being here. Have a great day.